This snazzy Tapir production is made possible by our patrons. If you'd like to join them, head over to patreon.com/snazzytapir to get early access to new episodes, access to the members-only Discord, and our exclusive monthly newsletter. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to A Game of One's Own, a podcast dedicated to solo and duet tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host, Maddy. My pronouns are they, them, and today I'm playing the wonderful game Death of the Author, designed by Samantha Leigh of Blinking Birch Games. And without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Sam, who's going to explain exactly what Death of the Author is all about.
Death of the Author is a 1 or 2 player tarot journaling game about a character who knows that they're a character in a story and is fighting for agency in that story against the wishes of their author. So you play as the character who tries to wrest narrative control from the author, and in the end, no matter the story, the character will confront their author. As a solo game, the player takes the role of the character and gradually learns more about their author along the way, as well as decides how the author responds to different changes to the story the character makes. As a duet game, one player is the character and the other player is the author. So as you play, the author tries to maintain control over the story, while the character fights to make different changes to the narrative. The character makes changes through the prompts. Each tarot card is associated with a different prompt, but that prompt is different whether it is upright or reversed. The character has 2 moves they can make. The first one is a reversal, which means they can flip the card over to get the other prompt. So if the card was drawn upright, then they can flip it to make it the reversed prompt. The other move is called Defiance, and this allows the character to completely rewrite part of the prompt. However, anytime the character uses one of their moves, the author has a chance to retaliate. Death of the Author is actually a hack of my other solo game, Anamnesis, though a lot has changed, mechanically speaking. But I wanted to write this game because I'm really interested in the relationship between an author and their character. And I always think about what a character would say if they got the chance to speak to their author, and this game explores that question.
Thanks so much to Sam for that insight into the game. Now for my playthrough, I decided to play solo, and the first thing I had to do was draw cards from the major arcana to represent the characters in my story. First, I drew the Hanged Man reversed to represent my protagonist. Some of the meanings associated with this card when reversed include egotism and inability to change, whereas the upright meanings include sacrifice and intuition. I decided to name my protagonist Kiera, and had a vague idea that perhaps the author wants Kiera to learn a hard lesson about selfishness and be punished for it. For the protagonist's friend, I drew the star reversed, which has connotations of despair and missed opportunities. I called this character Evie, and decided that she was the main character's girlfriend. Lastly, I drew the moon reversed to represent Kiera's foe. When reversed, the moon can have meanings such as confusion, unhappiness, and a release of fear and anxiety. But I decided to riff off the image of the moon itself, and made Kiera's foe a vampire called Frederick, who plans to take over her hometown. You can very clearly see the Buffy the Vampire Slayer influences already. Considering I started working on this episode around Halloween, I'm sure you can understand my thought process. I also drew another major arcana card to represent the author's note, the message that the author gives the main character before the story begins. I drew the Hermit, so I came up with the idea that the author might be using this story to play out grand, over-the-top narratives that their own boring, sequestered life cannot provide. But I guess we'll see how that plays out as we go. Now it's time to get stuck into the story. The game is split into 4 chapters, each with 3 scenes. So as we go through the story, I'll explain what prompts I got for each scene, and whether I used any moves to alter them. Each chapter uses a different suit of tarot cards, starting with Pentacles. For Chapter 1, Scene 1, I got the 3 of Pentacles reversed, which gave me the prompt, "You're given an insult you'll never forget." I used the reversal move to switch to the upright prompt, "You're given a warning that you'll never forget." I also had to draw another major arcana card to determine how the author reacts to the character's changes, and I got the tower reversed, which means obstacles, losses, or a volatile situation. So, now it's time to get into the first scene. See you on the other side. Chapter 1, Scene 1. Kiera hurried down the high street, eager to meet up with Evie at Cafe Mythos, as they did every Thursday after school. But something caught her eye. A pale face with an unbearable smirk, peering out of a dark window on the other side of the street. It was midwinter, so the sun had already set, and the light from the window made the face even more stark against the darkness outside. Kiera paused, then shook her head. Despite being the town's secret protector, tasked with defeating supernatural threats wherever they arose, Kiera dismissed this momentary sighting as a mere distraction. Nothing would get in the way of her Thursday cafe date. Evie had promised to buy her an eclair. Patrolling could wait until later. Or perhaps even tomorrow. However, it seemed that someone had other ideas. Mere seconds after turning away, that same smug face was right in front of her. The man blocking her path was wearing a long, black, double-breasted coat, which made his face appear even more wan and sickly. Now that he was up close, Kiera could see that his canines were unusually long and sharp. Dead giveaway. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" the figure asked. "None of your business," Kiera replied. "Oh, but I do believe it is my business. Little protector." Kiera froze. "You know what I am?" "Oh, darling! Anyone knows who you are. A spoiled brat who—" "Shut up," said Kiera, cutting him off before he could piss her off even more. "Who the fuck are you?" Kiera felt a shiver pass through her, as though someone had walked over her grave. Somehow, instinctively, she knew that she had done something wrong. She had changed something that wasn't meant to be changed. "Well, since you asked so politely, I'm Frederick Langley. Pleased to meet you, dear." Frederick extended a hand, but Kiera slapped it out of the way. "What are you doing here? What do you want?" she snapped. "Oh, thank you for asking. I want you gone, so I can have my fun with this little town." Kiera reached for her backpack, hoping to grab her scythe, but with lightning speed Frederick grabbed her hand in his. No, darling, it's far too soon for the final boss fight. First, I've got to sniff out your weakness." Frederick took a long, dramatic sniff and slid his other hand into her pocket. Before Kiera could react, he had her phone and saw the calendar notification on its lock screen. "Weekly date at Cafe Mythos, eh? My goodness, that was easier than I thought." Now on to Chapter 1, Scene 2. I drew the Four of Pentacles reversed, which gave me the prompt, "A war changes your home forever." I used the Defiance move to change the prompt to, "A disappearance changes your home forever." For the author's response, I drew the World, whose meanings, among others, include voyage and a change of place. Chapter 1, Scene 2. Kiera blinked in disbelief, but when she looked back towards Frederick, he was gone. All that was left was her phone on the ground, a hairline fracture spreading across the screen. Panic rose in her throat, tightening its grip. Evie. He was going after Evie. Kiera ran down the street, almost barreling into old Mrs. McCumber, but she managed to swerve at the last minute. "Careful, dear," Mrs. McCumber called out as Kiera dashed past, but Kiera did not reply. Her only thoughts were of Evie. Kiera burst through the door of Cafe Mythos, but did not see Evie at their usual table. Instead, she saw the staff and the customers in various states of shock and dismay. Kiera ran up to Andrea, one of the baristas. "What happened?" "Oh, Kiera, I'm so sorry. A man just burst in here and, well, he grabbed Evie and dragged her outside. I tried to go after him, stop him, but when I got outside, they were both gone. I don't know what to do. I've called the police, but I should have done something." Andrea seemed to be on the verge of tears. "Stuff like this doesn't happen here. It's a small town. Everyone knows each other. This shouldn't be happening." "It's okay, Andrea. You did your best. That's all we can ever do," Kiera said, trying to sound comforting. "Thanks, Kiera. I know how much time you two spend together. This must be awful for you. Kiera looked away, trying to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. She spotted a painting on the wall of a woman in chains, shrinking away from a terrifying sea monster. For a moment, Kiera was convinced that the woman had Evie's face. But as if with the tap of the delete key, the woman in the painting returned to normal. For Chapter 1, Scene 3, I drew the Page of Pentacles upright, which gave me the prompt, you make a promise to your friend that you can't keep. I'd already used both my moves for the chapter, so I had to let this one stand. Chapter 1, Scene 3. After spending a few moments checking on the other people in the cafe and making whatever poor attempts at comfort she could, Kiera turned to leave. Suddenly, her phone began to ring. Evie was calling her. Kiera answered the phone at once and stepped outside the cafe, her heart racing. Evie, is that you? Close but no cigar, protector. Frederick's voice oozed out of the phone, dripping with smugness. Where is she? Kiera demanded. If you hurt her, I'll fucking... Now, can't a kidnapper get a word in edgewise these days? She's unharmed. For now. And my merry band of kindred spirits are making their way into town. Kindred spirits, said Kiera. Yes, one might call them my brothers in arms. And if I hear that you've had a single hair on their pretty little heads, Evie will have one less body part to be worrying about. A muffled scream punctuated Frederick's words. Hush now, pet, he said. Let's hope your dearest Kiera doesn't let it come to that, eh? Kiera shouted into the phone, hoping against hope that Evie would be able to hear her. I'm coming for you, Evie, I promise, I won't let him hurt you! One more muffled cry, and the phone line went dead. Before I wrapped up Chapter 1, I had to draw one more card from the Major Arcana to represent the author's message to Kiera for this chapter. I drew the Devil reversed, which has meanings of independence, freedom, and regaining control. Chapter 1, Author's Message. Kiera felt her legs buckle under her, and she collapsed onto the pavement. She leaned against the front wall of the cafe, trying to focus on the cold stone pressing into her back. But thoughts of Evie, trapped and afraid, still dominated her thoughts. Suddenly, she heard a whisper in her right ear. She glanced around. No one was anywhere near her. Then she heard it again in her left ear this time. Still no one. She focused, trying to hear what the whisper was saying. If you want freedom, you'll have to earn it. Prove your worth. Or the story will end the way I choose. With terrible, heartbreaking loss. Kiera closed her eyes, thinking to herself, I don't have to prove myself to anyone. The whispers stopped. But Kiera knew they weren't truly gone. They were never truly gone. And with that, Chapter 1 is complete, and it's time for Chapter 2, Scene 1. I drew the King of Swords reversed, and decided to let this prompt stand. Your foe makes an unexpected appearance in the news. Chapter 2, Scene 1. Kiera dragged herself to her feet and began walking home. She needed to be somewhere warm and safe. She needed time and space to think, to gather her courage, to come up with a plan. As she opened the door, she heard the TV blaring in the living room. Hey, Mum, she called out. Hey, sweetheart, her mother called back. Kiera stepped into the living room to see her mother sitting on the sofa, cup of green tea in hand, watching the news. A known fugitive has been spotted near Halberton in Bedfordshire. The police are asking residents to report any sightings of this man, but are cautioned not to approach him. A spokesperson for the Bedfordshire Police said that they are doing everything they can to bring this criminal to justice. Kiera stared wide-eyed at the TV screen. Frederick stared back at her, still smirking. This was clearly a mugshot. Harsh lighting, grey backdrop, directly facing the camera. It made him look so mundane. You've not seen this creep around town, have you, love? Kiera's mother asked. No, Kiera lied. Never seen him before. Thank goodness. Well, I better start getting dinner ready. Her mother stood up and handed over the TV remote. In case you want to watch something more cheerful. Thanks, Mum. For Chapter 2, Scene 2, I drew the 9 of Swords upright. The prompt for this card is someone from your past returns to wreak vengeance on you, but I used the Defiance move to change it to someone from your past returns to give you a clue. For the author's response, I drew the Wheel of Fortune, which suggests new opportunities. Chapter 2, Scene 2. After taking some time to clear her head, Kiera set out again, determined to find Evie. She had no idea where to start, but she had to start somewhere. She finally decided to scope out a local cemetery, one of the stops on her nightly patrols. As she strolled along an avenue of gravestones, she spotted someone she hadn't seen in a year. Angie Granton had moved away from Howburton last November when her parents divorced, but before that she had taken it upon herself to make Kiera's school life as miserable as possible. Kiera grabbed a pair of headphones out her backpack and started walking purposefully in the opposite direction. But it was too late. Hey, Kiera! Reluctantly, Kiera turned back towards Angie and stuffed the headphones in her bag, narrowly avoiding getting sliced by the scythe. Hi, Angie. Long time no see. Kiera felt a strong urge to tear into Angie, to get out all her anger and fear and frustration, to let her know how much her passive-aggressive bullshit had made school a living hell. But she paused and glanced at the gravestone beside Angie. The name on the tombstone was Henrietta Granton. Shit. Angie's grandmother. Kiera fought down her fury, leaving in its wake a deep, painful awkwardness. As Kiera struggled to think of anything to say, Angie broke the silence. Yeah, I heard about what happened with Evie. Angie shuffled from foot to foot, struggling to maintain eye contact. I'm sorry. I know how close you are. Jesus, so the whole town knows already, huh? I mean, thanks, Angie. It was definitely a shock. Yeah, I can imagine. It's so weird, though. I could have sworn I saw her in the industrial estate, like an hour ago. What? Seriously? Have you told the police? No, it was only for a second, and it was dark. It was probably nothing. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. No, thank you, Angie. I'm glad you told me. Now it's time for Chapter 2, Scene 3. I drew the 8 of Swords upright, which has this prompt. You discover a body that is clutching a note bearing your name. I used the reversal move, which changed the prompt to you discover a body that is hauntingly familiar. The author's response to this change is represented by the Fool, which is associated with being reckless, careless, or gullible. Chapter 2, Scene 3. After saying goodbye to Angie, Kiera hurried out of the cemetery and made her way towards the industrial estate. She could just barely see the light of the moon shining weakly from behind the clouds. All the wholesalers and tradesmen had shut up shop for the night, leaving the estate eerily quiet. Kiera darted between buildings, peering into lightless windows, scouring alleyways and garages for any sign of Evie or Frederick. As she rounded a corner, her stomach lurched and her heart started pounding. There was a body lying on its side behind a skip, wrapped in a yellow coat. A horribly familiar yellow coat. A coat that Evie had bought on a trip into London with Kiera. Kiera stumbled towards the body, overcome by an unbearable dread. She crouched down and gently pulled the body towards her. The face. She didn't recognize the face. All at once she felt a rush of relief and a deep sense of shame. She had failed as a protector. Someone had been killed on her watch. This was her fault. But there was still hope for Evie. Maybe she really could save her. Kiera forced herself back to the present and began to examine the body. It was a young woman with straight, dark hair, definitely older than her and Evie. The 2 puncture wounds in her neck were unmistakable. Frederick. Kiera drew in a ragged breath and whispered to herself, "He's going to fucking pay." That's all the time we have for part 1 of Death of the Author. I'll be back next week to share the thrilling conclusion of our Vampire Hunter story in part 2. If you want to try Death of the Author for yourself, there's a link in the podcast description to the game's itch.io page, where you can buy a PDF copy or pre-order a physical copy. You can also find a link to Sam's socials and more of their amazing games in the description. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Game of One's Own. Our theme music, as always, is by James Barbarossa, and this week's episode also included music by Kevin MacLeod. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/snazzytapier for all of the bonus goodies. You can follow the show on social media at A Game of One's Own, and find out more about my work at snazzytapier.com or at Maddy is Abstract on social media. See you next time for more weird stories.